Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Writers Drinking Whiskey Open Bar, the show where we talk unironically about truth and beauty and ironically about everything else. I am your host that always overserves, so you should probably lose those keys, William R. Hincy. And joining me tonight, I got a really phenomenal panel. John McElroy, Dario Ciriello, Michael Kozlowski. Everybody, welcome to the bar.
Thank you, Bill.
Oh, William.
Awesome. And so I'll have the full description in the bios here. So if you want to find any of the work, websites, anything, just click that little box. If I can find the thing, I'm not a seasoned YouTuber yet, but if you want to find anything there, it'll be there for you. Round number 2, author life. I like just hearing that. Love that we said round number 2. Writer's block. What is it? And how do you break down that wall? We started with Mike and Max. So Dario, let's start with you this time.
You know, I've thought a lot about this, and the first thing I want to say is that it's not what most people think of. I think most writers, especially younger ones or newer ones, have this kind of notion that their muse has left them and they're on their own, and suddenly the magic's gone and the fairy dust isn't happening anymore. And I don't believe that model. As you know, Bill, I think our muse is our own subconscious, and that's always going to be there, and it's always feeding you stuff. But I think when we get blocked, there's always a real world reason. I'd say most of the time it's that, it's not that we're too busy. I'd say the number one reason is it's a message from your subconscious that you either have a character or plot problem. It's a red flag. And I think when you're stuck, you really need to look at whether you know your characters, whether you're portraying them the way they are, whether you've got a big plot issue that is causing you problems and you haven't realized it yet. But I think there's usually a writerly reason. Secondary or along with that is real life. Sometimes you're just fried. Sometimes the demands of family and kids and work are just too much, and you can't focus. But I think they're always nuts and bolt problems. I don't think they're magical or metaphysical ones. And I think you just have to dig into it. But the first place I always look is at my characters. It's usually a character trying to tell me something. I could say I've been suffering some block myself recently with trying to get a new novel. I know exactly why that is. It's because I edit for a living, and I do a lot of editing, and I have a few really, really good clients. I'm super self-critical. I was always, I always had trouble turning off the inner editor when I wrote anyway. But that's got even harder as I'm so used to to reading in analytical mode. So I have trouble turning off that inner editor. So that's another problem too, I think, sometimes, is that one's being too critical at way too early a stage, i.e. first draft. So that's my thinking on it. But I don't think there's anything supernatural going on.
Sure. Well, I tend to think of it, and I'm glad you brought that up, Dario. Thanks for the thoughtful analysis on that there's different kinds of block, right? There's kind of your intra-story block, which is, I've come across a problem in this story and I feel blocked from that, right? Like maybe I could go off and write something else, but I feel very blocked with this novel or this short story, this play, screenplay, whatever it happens to be. I think there's real psychological block. And I think that's I have real trauma, real stress, real grief or something I'm dealing with that you need to deal with that before you can get in touch with your creative self again. And that's a more serious one that I think is more, go talk to a therapist. Don't jump onto the Writers Drinking Whiskey program. It's like there's stuff going on. Like, and
you do it your way and I'll do it mine. Jeez.
And I think there's the general block, which you'll hear, and I think this is what people tend to use for writer's block. Probably the first and the second one a lot of times is just to where maybe you're healthy emotionally, psychologically, physically, but you just feel like you can't write. And I think some of those can be the placebo block, to where you've bought into the notion that there's a thing called writer's block. And you get the placebo effect from it, that you think, oh, this can happen. And then, just like the placebo can heal, and it's been proven time and time to be able to heal, it can also damage. And I think sometimes you can get that damage if you believe in it, too much. So I think that is an important distinction, is what type are you dealing with? The psychological, I think you need a psychologist, you need a therapist of some sort. For our discussion here, the interest story, I think there's interesting ways to get out of that. We can talk through. I think the general block, even the placebo block, I think all of those, there's methods to get yourself, potentially out of it. So maybe we can mix up the order here instead of just going slavishly through how everyone appears on my screen. Let's go with you, Mike. What say you?
All right. I think
what did you said?
I have no idea what that means. I have another. So anyway, this is why it's called Writers Drinking Whiskey. I think you guys nailed it. As far as I don't think of it as something metaphysical. Some muse has left you, like Dario said. It's I think your muse is within you. Outside of just general inspiration, somebody else can inspire you, but the idea of some mystical creature, I don't buy that. I think generally interest story, I'd say it's just sort of you hit a spot, right? I wouldn't even think of that as a block. For me, it's just I got a problem. I got to figure out where the story goes, and I'm a more of a pantser than I am a planner, so that happens all the time for me. I'm 3 chapters in and go, where was I going? And then 3 chapters later I go, man, I was a genius in chapter 1. So it's all over the place. I don't think of it as some psychological problem. A big thumb or something.
Hey, Mac, you turned into a thumb.
Oh, that was awesome.
There you go. Yeah, something that's covering the camera.
Oh,
there, if you want to do it. Yeah. If you make a noise, suddenly there you go. Now you're looking good.
Okay. So, go ahead.
Do you want me to jump? I've got it easier because I write short story, and it's pretty hard to get blocked on a short story when it's like 4 pages. But where I kind of I just lose the momentum. Just kind of lose the push to write some more stories. And I think unlike, say, novelists, there are all sorts of little calls for submissions out there in the world, little contests and little literary magazines. And, we're looking for a 1,200 word short story about X. And that becomes a really good kind of, it breaks the spell. And so that might be fun to write. But, there are not a lot of those, send me your novel, we're having a little contest next week. Sure. So I've got it, easier in that sense. It just, and I guess, and maybe I kind of hinted at that when we talked about the earlier question. I get really down on the publishing process and the marketing process. And I still am. I'm in a kind of a slump on that. And on behalf of all of us, which was really the hidden message behind the literally multi-million-dollar contracts, because some celebrity has done some boneheaded thing and writes about it. So I find that uphill push, even tough writing short stories. And I think that would be magnified in terms of the amount of time and energy and effort and blood and sweat that novelists put into their work on the, quite frankly, sometimes unlikelihood that it will really hit what it deserves. So that's, I don't know, maybe a structural block and maybe kind of an overarching thing I have to work through all the time.
Sure.
Well,
So I also have to work on keeping my thumb off the camera. I guess that's technology.
Michael
I don't even know
also,
where the little hole is. There it is. Okay.
Michael also mentioned being a pantser. I am too, and I have written short stories. I find short form much more difficult. You've got a lot more room in a novel, but everything you say is true, Mac. I think for the novelist, the pantsing thing adds a whole extra dimension of potential for getting stuck in a story. But it's just, that's our process. That's how we work. And that's why your character's so important. Because if you're a pantser, it's character driven. Fuck plot. Plot isn't even in the picture. The characters are the plot. They're making it as they go.
Yeah.
So we get stuck. That's why I always look to characters first.
Interesting.
And I love short stories. I generally prefer to read them and write them. But I have, 3 novels, I think, out. It's more of a challenge. I have far more novels started and stopped at some location on my computer than I have finished, because sometimes they just don't work, and that's kind of the curse of the pantser. It's like, oh, I got this great line, and then you go, oh, well, that was about a chapter, so we'll come back to that some other time, whatever. But I think I was starting to say before with the kind of interstory blocks, I just don't feel them as blocks. You just kind of work. I usually go for a drive. I do some of my best work when I'm driving, or I'll read, somebody that inspires me, or watch something, and it can be just catching some little bit in a movie that goes, oh, that's, that just gave me an idea,
Sure.
Rarely in the middle do I get stuck. It's almost always at the beginning, just getting it going. And I think a lot of, I think Bill Sword made the point, a lot of like beginning writers or people that, everybody's a writer, right? Everybody's going to write a book, but 1% of us actually write a book. But I think a lot of people, that's just an easy way for them to, start. I got writer's block. I just have writer's block. They don't even know what it is. It's just a great excuse for, I'm not sitting in the seat writing something, So
it took me a really long time to learn that an idea isn't a story.
But you never know which ones are, right? So a lot of, that's why it doesn't bother me to have 20 stories that might never get written, that I've written 1 or 2 or 3 chapters of. It doesn't bother me that I have a set of notes in my phone that are longer than anything I'll ever get to, of a piece of dialogue or an idea for a story or whatever. It's just, it's a well to pull from. When I do want to write something, whether it's a short story or something, oh, I remember this piece of whatever. Sometimes I'll just scroll through the notes and, okay, that's going to get me going. I know not every idea is going to work, right? And hopefully I learned something from the chapter or 2 that I wrote, to take forward, whether it's how I wrote a piece of dialogue or whatever, something in the craft. And then it's fine to sit there. But, maybe my kids will put it together in my legacy, someday. These are all the half stories written by Michael Kozlowski. You'll love them. Finish it. It could be a color by numbers thing. Finish it at your own.
The choose your own adventure, the Michael Kozlowski story. I think there's, it's funny. I was doing a local author was doing a book launch here, and they asked me to host it. Right, so I got to do a live version, basically, of this show. It was super fun. It was great. Los Feliz, which is basically Hollywood, the kind of trendy part. The super rich people in Hollywood go to Beverly Hills. When you're making your way up, you go to Los Feliz, and then the in between is everyone else, right? And so we get done it there, and I love it when this happens. But it's he was talking about, oh, one of the stories ended up being two stories that he abandoned that ended up coming together. So sometimes those things you work on, yeah, it ended up going nowhere, but that idea feeds in, to what you're
and that
doing.
might show up later somewhere, even
Right.
My first quick aside, my first really piece of published work was a novella that started as a novel. And, I probably wrote 4 or 5 chapters of it and got halfway through and I have no idea where this is going. But there was some great stuff in the first 3. I'm like, okay, well, we'll just take out this other garbage and start from this spot that was really good. And yeah, it was the first thing that got published. So
sure,
they can carry on.
That works out. Yeah.
Well,
So,
everything, the story is the boss, as Alfred Bester used to say. Every idea or everything you write has a story dictates its own length. You can't decide it's going to be a certain length until it's done. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of padding, or you're skipping stuff. And I know Bill does, and I guess you guys do too. I envy people or writers who find short fiction as easy as novels. Although Mike didn't mention novels, you're strictly short story, I think. But
I'm novels and
sorry,
short
not
stories. Yeah,
not
Mac,
Mike.
I think is
Mac, yeah,
Mac, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of you can do both, and I envy that. I find long form much easier in a way.
They both certainly have their challenges. I struggle sometimes just getting enough of that filler in there, making it a novel, because I'm a very linear storyteller. So I find that I have to go back and, rather than kill my darlings, I'm usually, birthing more because I haven't described the sunset or whatever,
Right.
And then in a short story, the challenge there is always to get the point across in, the 5,000 words they're going to give you, or the 3,000 words, or whatever that space is.
Okay. I do want to get us though, because then just for time's sake here, there's the aspect of what is writer's block. And I think perhaps more importantly, there's the how do you get out of it, right? So if there's writers tuning in and they're like, I've hit this block, regardless of what it is. Maybe if it's you had a death in the family, you got to go deal. You're more important than your writing. Go deal with that. But the other aspects we talked about, intro story block, like just general block, whatever it might be, that's preventing you from being able to continue on in your writing career. How do you get past that? So maybe then, Mac, you want to take us from there?
Yeah. I think I kind of hinted at that. I'll start searching the internet and ask around. Is there a magazine that's asking for a short story on a theme, or some idea there, and that'll kind of force me to sit down and write a story. And I'll usually send it in, and most of the time that's the last I ever hear of it. But it will have gotten me off that sense of block. So
sure.
I've got as I said, I've got the easy answer, because they're out there all the time.
Well, that's actually a great answer. I had on James Grady, who wrote the book 6 Days of the Condor, which became the movie 3 Days of the Condor back in the 70s with
which
Robert Redford.
I watched the other night, and it is terrific.
Awesome.
Redford,
thank you.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. And Jamie, a super great guy, and he gave a couple examples, and I'll try to include them on the individual video here when we talk about this. But one of them was he had an old poet that was his teacher back in high school, Richard Hugo, and his idea was you have writer's block, you pick a color, you go outside, whatever that color is, it's red. You go outside, you find the first red car. That red car, you find the first 2 letters of the license plate. That is going to be the number of the numbers. That's going to be the number of stanzas you're going to write. And then the next 2 numbers, that's going to be the words you're going to write each stanza. And you're going to write a poem based on that. And James, he adapted that for fiction. And let's see, do I have it written down? I do. So for fiction, he said, what's your favorite number? Go pick up a newspaper. If you live in a place that still has physical newspapers, you find that newspaper. You go to page 9, whatever your favorite number is. Page 9, the bottom left story, bottom right story. You pick that story and you write a story fictionalizing whatever they're talking there. And what he found when he did it for his old, professor, Richard Hugo, and what he's told it to people is the idea is you get out of your headspace and you just start writing something.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. And so it's you don't realize that half the time it is just you're in your way. I think a lot of times, right? And I'm very much into the fact that, and a lot of my writing is described as literary. There's a lot of satirical aspects and things of it, but all of it, I bleed for, right? I believe everything I write, I believe is art, and whatever genre you want to put it into, I'm going to bleed for it. There's going to be some aspect has some like emotional anguish to me. I'm giving myself, I'm bleeding something for whoever's reading that, or maybe just myself in the production of it. I think the other aspect is you can hit a block because that's a painful process to do. And you have to at some point realize that even like this show, right? It feels live, but it's not. Like we can edit this down the line, right? So I can release this to everyone on here and we can go, oh, you know what? I wasn't comfortable with how that came out or whatever. I can edit it. Your writing is eminently that way. But you have to get past that embarrassment. You have to get past that potential for humiliation. You have to let the lunch tray spill all over you. And face that again, right? And like you're in the middle of the gym, everyone's laughing at you, you're humiliated. You have to face that again, brave enough to do it, knowing that, hey, I can censor this, I can change it, I can decide how much I bleed, right? I always say bleed, but don't give up the ghost. Like I always get to decide like where that point is, but you can't do that if you're guarding yourself at all times. You have to be willing to give it up to a degree. You have to be willing to hurt, to a degree, if that's what type of writing, you're doing. And that can be hard. But it can be really rewarding.
So Bill, here's a live television kind of a thing. What stimulates the thought for a short story writer? Well, I've always wanted to write a story about, and I've always had the title called The Rope of Shame. And we all had a rope of shame around 7th grade in junior high school. Remember the rope that was hung from the highest rafter in the gym? And no human being could climb to the top, And the gym teacher made us try. And we'd get up there, we're dangling like worms on a line. I mean, forget thrown lunch trays. The rope of shame. It's my most consistent nightmare. I may have to write the story, The Rope of Shame, the universal.
I love it. What a metaphor.
Universal shame. Thanks, Bill. You've stimulated me.
He said, ejaculated.
He said abruptly. He shouted enthusiastically.
Awesome.
He interrupted rudely.
Right. So what are some other just techniques maybe that the panels kind of come up here when you're stuck? It can be small or little.
I'm oh sorry, Michael. Go on. Go ahead.
Preface, I guess, with I think there's two types of writing block. Sort of that I got to get through the story. I'm stuck in the middle somewhere, or stuck starting it. And then there's what's brought on more just from outside stuff. And Dario had mentioned early in his very eloquent dissertation on writer's block. It was, traumatic sort of, I got stress at work, my marriage is whatever, blah, blah, blah. So big proponent. a therapy, whether it's a phone call a month type of thing. I think everybody should do that, whether you feel like you need it or not, because sometimes you just need to talk to somebody that, you don't even know you need to talk to somebody. So that gets you past some of that sort of stuff. I think for our conversation more is the kind of inner story. I'm stuck on a plot. I'm stuck on what this character is going to do. I don't know how this is going to end. And for me, it's either inspiration, usually from another story, from somebody else's work. So that's when I'll take advantage of that downtime and, okay, I'm going to catch up on my to be read pile or whatever. Usually something in there will spur me, through to the next, it's all the hero's journey in the end, sort of. So, you'll probably see something in what you're reading, that inspires wherever you're at. Other than that, I said my best work driving, just my maps is set to default to avoid highways. So unless I have to be somewhere at a certain time, I never take the highway. I'll take a 4-hour route for a 2-hour trip because I get to see stuff I didn't see. And, I spend some great time working and writing and just, otherwise it's all concrete and cars, that's not very inspiring. I've seen that a million times. So take the long road, less traveled, and it gives you a lot of time to think. You're just down a 2-lane or whatever, and you can usually work through those problems or see something that inspires the next story. And I guess lastly, I'd say people will be stuck on an idea, right? I said I have way more stories not finished than finished. And I think people I have to do this. I have to get through it. And sometimes you just got to say, okay, that idea is dead. Maybe it comes back later. Let's move on to something else.
Yeah. No, I think that's all really wise. I love the point too. Well, for one, I want to make sure I acknowledge it. That point of sometimes it's a dead idea, at least for now, right? Maybe it comes back. Maybe it merges with something else you come up with later.
Sure.
The novel I just finished that I've been working on for 13 plus years, Pirates of Appalachia. I just finished, and that was one of the aspects of that was a dead idea that came and worked into that whole mess. So I do think you need to know when is it time to call it. When is it time to kind of move on, and maybe that'll come back to you. It's when you love something, let it go.
Right. The wise words of Kenny Rogers: "Know when to hold them."
No one to hold them.
Yeah, exactly. Right. There's that aspect. I think that's very wise, and you need to know that. The other aspect I love because it reminded me. I used to commute, right? Because I'm LA, right? If you've lived here, you commuted at some point. And if not, then I judge you, and I don't know what you're doing with your life because everyone here should be commuting at some point. But that drive, that getting your mind off of it, right? Because we go into autopilot, especially when you know where you're going. It gets that subconscious working for you. And I think it was an old Einstein quote, but it was something like, you can't solve a problem on the level of consciousness that created it. And I might be butchering that a little bit, but it's kind of that if you're consciously thinking about something, I wrote it like I'm sitting at this desk writing it. Well, a lot of times we get blocked because we have a problem. And you're not going to solve that problem sitting at that desk because that's where you created it.
Right.
And getting out of that conscious space for a drive, getting out, especially off the highway to where you can kind of get out and see other things. I'm a big proponent. I love riding my bike. I love actually riding for 4 hours. And then I'll kind of I'll have some things that I'm a little stumped on. And I'll kind of leave them and go off. And then when I ride my bike, I hit that pain where I'm exercise that pain actually absolves me of that thought. And then suddenly I'm coming home, I'm coming down the mountain, and I'm just I suddenly have all these great ideas. They're just teeming, and a lot of times it's wording because I like to be very poetic. So a lot of times it's that wording. How do I get that exactly perfect? It comes. So showers, I think work out really well.
Oh my God, what is it about showers?
Right.
They're like that's supernatural. Mine is for Mike it's driving, for you it's biking, walking for me. Same thing. Showers are just somewhere else.
Showers for everybody. Everybody can be inspired in the shower.
It's unreal. I want to add one more thing I thought of about possible causes for writer's block. I don't know about you guys, but I've always found writing extremely hard. Nine out of 10 writing sessions are hell for me. Occasionally I'll have a great one, but generally I find it extremely hard work. And I want to add, as a possible cause of block, just not wanting to do the fucking work.
Yeah.
What?
And you'd rather do something else. For me, when I'm actually getting writing done, and the only way I've ever been able to complete novels, get stories finished, is when I work daily at the same time every day, and it's all the time. I don't give myself time off from it. I think there's a lot to be said for habits and a work ethic.
Sure.
Notwithstanding what Bill said about reinforcing the block by doing the thing that you associate with being blocked.
Right.
But I think
sometimes you have to lay brick, right?
Sorry?
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to lay brick, right? You're going to make a fence.
Exactly.
You may not want to get out there, but you're going to have to lay the brick. You have to get out and just do it.
And maybe another thing there is, something that's worked for me and other writers I know sometimes is not writing in order. If you're having trouble with the current scene or chapter, if you have easier for outliners than us pantsers.
Because I have such a problem doing that. Right. I know where you're going, but man, I have such
go
a hard
write
time.
another scene is kind of hard if you're a pantser. But there's no reason one has to write in a sequence. I usually know my ending, although it may change. But I've got my opening scenes, probably a couple of them, couple of waypoints and an ending. So maybe you can hit one of those,
Yeah. Yeah, I'll usually write something else. It works better for me. If I'm stuck, just go play with something else. I always have 2 or 3 or 4 or 20 stories going. So, I can pick something just, I got a page done. But I do agree on the routine. I write much better when I kind of, okay, I'm going to come home, I'm going to, do whatever. Even to the point of, the habits, like, I'm going to take a shower, then I'm going to make a cup of tea, then I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write, just that sort of get myself in the writer's mood. Sure.
Well, and not to corporatize it necessarily, because you're an engineer. This is shameful, but I'm a director for a quality regulatory department, right? Like there's the aspect they call deep work. And that's usually what you hit when you've been working on something for a period. So I think there is also the getting there if you get to the office, and we don't like to think of writing this way because I'm very artistic about it, clearly, but hit the office at the same time, work, you take your lunch. The deep work usually doesn't actually start until you've been doing it for 3-4 hours.
Right.
And it's that last 2 hours that end up being golden. There you feel really great about it. That first 4 hours still might actually be good stuff, but it's harder. Yeah. And you feel it. You feel the labor of it. And then you hit that deep work where your brain and everything is synced, and you have to get there. And sometimes you have to get there the hard way. You have to,
I was
brick. You had
to I was struck by Dario's comment that, it doesn't, want to write, right? There's days where it's so much work to write. And I won't say I never feel that, but fortunately it's rare for me. When I write, I enjoy it. And it's, I don't know, it's kind of mood setting. I might not get anything worth writing done, but I enjoy the session. I'll put on, a vinyl typically, I'll make a drink or have a cup of tea or whatever. I like to imbibe in cannabis. So, I get in a little mindset.
I was just about to say that because we've talked before. I'm like, you light a joint. Like there's something.
For sure.
Like,
for sure. And it's just, it's just the whole, thing, right? And the cats come in, I'm having the dogs are under my feet, and, it's, they're at the door now. but it's just, I just enjoy being in the moment, regardless of what I produce, and when when I produce something good, then awesome.
Right.
You get,
no,
you,
I did.
you guys are so marvelously disciplined. I'm kind of
Bill,
haphazard.
Mac, you're almost off the screen. It's almost just glasses. You're back. There you go.
Am I back? I'm slipping down on this comfortable chair.
That lazy
It's
boy's
leather.
eating you alive.
I'm alive. Yeah, when I was, most of the stories in my short fiction, I went the whole period, I it wasn't a muse, but I'd get these ideas at 2 or 3 in the morning. And it drove my much suffering life crazy, because and we had this kind of little anteroom off the bedroom, and she'd hear me grumble, then she'd hear me, clicking away. But I found I could really hit that little zone, for 2 or 3 hours. Yeah. And that went on for about a year, about the year that I was, I guess, deep diving or deep working, Bill, to use your phrase, on my collection. That was when it really got produced. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Somewhat haphazardly, but just I'd wake up.
Sure.
There you go. I don't know. Pretty nutty.
Inspiration strikes.
Right. Whatever works.
Well, yeah, I tend to think of it, to go back to that Einstein quote a little, as the level of consciousness. I tend to think of conscious versus subconscious. And I want the subconscious because it's way smarter, right? Everyone knows scientifically subconscious is way quicker. It's way smarter. I want my writing to be done there. So there's the laying the brick, the blocking and tackling, the getting stuff out, getting, to use a sculpting metaphor, which is how I tend to think of the writing process. I need to get the clay there. I need to get it somewhat formed. And then I want to go to bed. I want to go for a bike ride. I want to take a shower. I want something that is still in my head, but I want to let my subconscious mind do it and let my conscious mind catch up to it. The one that I think about a bit is that as I was working on Pirates, there's basically 4 pillars. There's almost 4 novels that make up this epic absurdist satire I've been working on. One of them literally never made any sense to me. And I kept thinking, this is bullshit. I'm a crazy person. I'm going way too far. This one's nutty. But I trusted myself. I had faith in myself that I know there's a part of me that knows why that's happening. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I need to sit and write these 70,000 words for this. And trust myself that this happens. And I swear if it ends up being 70,000, I'm at word 65,000, and it finally hit. And I was like, oh, I know exactly why this was so vital to the story and why crazy. It couldn't exist without it.
Such a great feeling, right? I had that happen a lot in my fiction, where it's just, whether it's just a throwaway line or some action that the character did that you're like, I don't know, I'm just filling up space kind of. Yeah. And then subconscious at work, and 4 chapters later you're like, oh my God, that's why he did it. It surprised myself.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
The subconscious knows exactly what it's doing. I think a lot of writing problems are in the transcription. And I think that's one of the reasons, and Stephen King talks about this in his little book, one of the reasons why, for me anyway, same time, same place daily works really well, because it facilitates that dialogue and makes that channel of communication between the conscious and the subconscious, the listening, much easier. Yeah. But I think the subconscious knows exactly what it's doing. I've had the experiences you guys are talking about, and often realize that I've consciously interpreted some material wrong. Like, once I got 2 characters transposed, I couldn't figure out why the story felt so weird. And I realized that literally each character was saying what the other should be saying and taking the role of the other. The material was right. I was transcribing it wrong. And once I realized that, it was fine.
Sure.
I know it sounds a little surreal, but you guys get it.
No, I get it.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And to break that, I think the counterpoint is, yeah, try to be consistent, but especially since most writers have day jobs, right? Or they're retired, right? Mac, like you're like saying, like, oh, my wife's so
Yeah.
happy. I was a lawyer all these years, and we get to eat,
Yeah.
And the flip side is sometimes breaking the routine can get you out of the rut. So if every day you write at your computer at 6 a.m. and you hit that rut, sometimes you don't need to do that permanently, but take your phone out, go on a nature walk, go sit down next to the creek. Or you guys in Michigan or South Carolina have beautiful scenery. In LA here, I can just go walk out to our reservoir and see whatever random reservoir creatures are out there, right? But go out, like, break the routine, break the timing, break the, I think really importantly, sometimes breaking the method. Sometimes I like to write I used to write at the bar here, just on the other side. And then I have a desk that's just kind of just there. It rises and falls or whatever. And I 90% of my writing there. But if I hit some deadlock, then I'll take my phone. I'll go pick my son up early. I need to pick him up from school. I'll go early, like an hour, and I'll write on my phone. Or I'll take paper. Sometimes paper, like we don't like I used to always write on paper. I stopped because it's just very inefficient. You have to transcribe it, or there is software, but I write like a doctor, so no software is ever going to figure out whatever the hell it is I'm putting on there. But sometimes that difference in timing, form, methodology can get you out of whatever rut you're in. A lot of times I think it's just a rut. You need to try to find your way out. And my last bow on this, yeah.
Yeah, if I could jump in, because I've kind of portrayed my stuff so haphazardly, but I thinking about it quite a few times when I was really stuck. I've got kind of a little Zen place I go. It's a place for lunch. It's out on a dock along a creek, and it's gorgeous and quiet. And and that has broken the ice jam for me, actually quite a few times as I think about it. So all of you talking about having some place can be a kind of discipline too. So I'd have to add that to my short list.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that. And then my bow of it, and then I'll open it up to you guys, is that I had on S.J. Roseanne. It's spelled R-O-Z-A-N. Bestsellers and tons of crime fiction and mysteries and things. And she mentioned this on an episode we just recorded that will probably maybe out before this and maybe out a little later than this by the time it comes out. But she had really great advice to this, and it was based on a band leader. So this is kind of third hand. If you listen to the episode, she'll give the discreet advice on it, and the person will get their proper praise for it. But it was a band leader that said, as he hired new people, he used to always say, when you get lost, and I know you will, because you're going to think about the girl you're going to go on a date with, or you're going to think about, what happened that day, or your parents, whatever it is, find the melody. And she took that for her writing, which was find the reason she wrote that piece originally. And it was what's the big idea? So like with Pirates, it took me a long time, and I realized it's a treatise on tribalism. So it's an epic absurd satire. There's all kinds of things, but at the end of the day, it's all about tribalism and the dangers and the pitfalls of it. So you find that melody, find the reason you initially started writing that. And if you have that issue, whatever it is, when you get that melody, it'll actually get you past it, because it'll find its way. And when she said that, I was like, oh, it's such a beautiful way to think of it. Is that, it's the melody, you think music. And I know, Mike, actually you have I know it was a cover band when we talked, but I think you've started on your own music and things now.
Doing a little bit of my own original stuff now.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of sometimes you get off tune, but you don't find the melody back.
Mm.
And writing, it's a little harder to think what the melody is, but the melody is the big
It's
concept.
theme.
Reason,
It's
like
theme.
The theme, yeah.
Yeah, that's tremendous advice. That's a really, really good one.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So anyone else before we move on and we hit the last subject for tonight?
I think I'm good. Beat that horse.
That horse is dead. We beat it. I kicked it a few times while it was down because I want to know. I want the other horses to know what kind of man I am. Thanks for tuning in. The show is a labor of fun, and it's truly a reward in its own right. But if you would like to support me or the other amazing authors I have on there, consider picking up a book. Any of the writers we have on here would be a great addition to your bookshelf. Each one is a master storyteller and just a great person to boot, so you'd be doing them and yourself a great favor in picking those up. And while I would never call myself a master, because that would be, as we said in the 90s, conceited, I do have on a pretty good authority from critics and my mom alike that I'm not bad. So if you wouldn't mind picking up one of my books, that would be great as well. I would appreciate it. Thanks again for watching. And thanks to my great panel of guests for coming on and spending this time with us. Cheers.